We are the Keyboard Samurai, a podcast focused on sharing insights to help those working in cybersecurity companies, be them technology or services. Each session, your host, Will Klusovsky, aka Will Clue, sits down with professionals in our industry to illuminate topics that will help your security biz, team, or self be better. Let's hack into it now. Hey, everybody, welcome back. This time you're in for a little treat. I've got probably one of my oldest colleagues that I've worked with or known longer than a lot of other people I've worked with in the industry. He's known me most of my career. So, Joe, welcome to the show. Say hi, who you are.
Hi, Joe Cardin. Will is right. I don't know if I'm the oldest. I might be the oldest based on age, but yeah. Knowing Will for it's got to be coming close to 25 years.
Yeah,
I started there in 2001. Yeah, great.
Awesome. So we're going to chat about AI and security. I know everybody loves talking about AI and security, but I'm interested to hear. So like Joe gets to work on the cooler stuff is what I would say. Like you've decided you're not just looking at automating SOC stuff. You're actually looking at kind of the future of how AI gets, actually implemented, used, and really going to change our lives. So I guess what are the, I don't know, top 2 or 3 things you're seeing right now with relation to security that AI is really going to drive and make a big change on?
Yeah, so I separate it in 2 different pillars. One is AI in security, like i.e. AI embedded in some sort of security product. But the second pillar, which I think most people really don't pay attention to, is really securing AI. And I think that area is going to really dramatically improve. And I think there's a number of new foundational threats or attack vectors targeting AI that we don't know of today, or most people don't know of today, as well as I truly believe it's at its infancy stage. I think it's only in a compound.
What are some of those like things that everybody's not aware of?
Yeah, so right now everybody's been focused on securing their generative AI models. And I think Hugging Face today, and it's March 3rd, I think there's over 1.1 million open source models on Hugging Face that anybody could download. And in those models, there's a lot of embedded things that people should scan their model. But I consider that kind of low hanging fruit. I think there's a lot of free scanning tools that you can use from an open source perspective. I'm very aware of what the hackers are doing, which is targeting infrastructure, i.e. your cloud providers, your specific systems that most of these AI models are running on GPU driven hardware, or DPU or TPU or XPU. Those systems need those new processors, and those processors are inherently designed for performance and have literally little to nothing for security. So the attackers love that. I was described by a major cloud provider that their GPU infrastructure, over 1 million servers, 8 million GPUs, is an apartment building with no doors. Yeah, lots of doorways. So
I guess it makes physical security easier.
Yes, yeah. Lots of doorways, no doors. And inherently cloud providers want larger density, larger shared infrastructure on those systems, so they can maximize their compute. But at the same time that they do that, you are allowing adversaries to target that infrastructure. And a lot of organizations will say, oh, we got a good perimeter. Well, the capability to embed new applications on a GPU today has gotten significantly easier, and it's compounding at a really rapid scale. As of October last year, me and another gentleman identified about 25 unknowns, and already, I don't know, it's probably 6 months later, we're up to about 199 net
Wow.
new unknowns that are targeting GPU environments.
So what's the solution? So like, yeah, the infrastructure, obviously the perimeter, but like, are we talking security on chip next, or are we talking
I
like
think there's,
something else?
yeah, I think there's going to have to be either an endpoint solution, which is what, we're experimenting with. I've spoken to all the endpoint providers. They don't consider it an issue yet. I mean, many of them said it's not an issue yet because it hasn't happened in the Wall Street Journal. And these are some of the largest endpoint providers that sell endpoint security.
Well, and there's also
And
like 3 or 4 clients, and that's it, right?
well,
Like chip
you make a
manufacturers.
good point. Yes, even some of our conversations with those 3 or 4 clients. But here's the misnomer. Well, is uh, all these GPUs, and if you look at Hugging Face, all the ML models are going to be put at the edge
Mhm.
because they're making them smaller. So as of 30 minutes ago, I hung up with a critical infrastructure provider, an OEM manufacturer, that is going to be deploying really small ML models, generative AI models at the edge on millions of their management systems worldwide.
Mhm.
And every single one of those systems is going to have some sort of GPU or TPU on those systems. So, yes, today you're thinking about, hey, all I have to concern myself is with these cloud providers. But the forecast from NVIDIA, Statistica, is right now, I think it's going to be about $1 billion in GPUs will be sold in 2025. But by 2034, in the next 9 years, it's going to be $1 trillion a
Oh,
year
yeah, for
business.
sure.
And it's because everything's going to go to the edge.
To the edge. Well, it makes sense if
And
you think about like a mining company who has to send a drill down underground where it's going to lose connectivity. If you can put the ML on there so that it does what it needs to do safely, but to your point, if that gets compromised when it's above ground on 5G or whatever,
yeah,
and then it's going down, oh man, it's scary thoughts.
yeah, yeah. And they're in everything. I mean, everything that's coming about, from drones to autonomous vehicles to building automation systems to um, even nuclear power systems,
Mhm.
these small modular reactors.
Oh yeah,
Um, all the big vendors, GE, Hitachi, Westinghouse,
Westinghouse. Yeah.
they're all going to be deploying some sort of XPU architecture. And people really haven't thought about the security around securing essentially that new chipset that has created um, foundational open exposure. And right now, NVIDIA's foundational model or foundational application system is called CUDA. Everybody else uses OpenCL.
Mhm.
So it's no different than looking at a Linux system or a Windows system. You have that base operating system to connect to that chip. Uh, the second that you have new libraries on there, you have new exposures.
Well,
So
is it
it's really,
it sounds to me a little bit like the IoT OT industry when it first came out, because like the reason you had like clarity coming out because they were a asset awareness tool that was already in that environment, so it understood when Rockwell and Siemens stuff was communicating, where you put that on a Palo device or whatever. It had no idea what that was, but everybody's since caught up now. So is that what we're kind of saying now from an AI perspective? We need to have another monitoring tool, protection tool in place.
Yeah, and I think I mean, for both you and I worked at MSSPs. I really believe knowing where this XPU growth cycle is going to go. If I'm an MSSP or an MSP, I would really start planning my practice around what do we need to do to understand that new architecture, and what are the solutions that we need to start thinking about representing, either from a managed service perspective, securing a model perspective, securing the chip perspective, securing the memory. So anything that you would typically have for a CPU, now you're going to have to start thinking about security software for a GPU architecture.
Is this something that's going to be prevalent to all, like SMB up to enterprise? Is only an enterprise problem? What do you think?
I think initially it would probably start at the larger enterprises because they're the ones that can afford this new architecture. But as of, I don't know, a month ago, maybe it's a little bit more than a month ago, when NVIDIA announced their new Grace Blackwell, you can buy an NVIDIA chip box for $250. So I think it's going to be in the SMB, like literally by the end of this year. And I think it's going to be everywhere. I truly think people will run models for small applications that you might run in a hospital, like clinical diagnosis. I think those models will run locally. I don't think a hospital will allow you to run it from a cloud environment from a PII perspective. And I think you're going to have these boxes in like every single room in a hospital. That's, the nursing or the clinician will be able to ask this AI chatbot or ingest this client's information into the system. It'll be a closed system, but you'll still have to secure it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Bringing the AI to to those businesses to solve that specific app, because we're talking right now about sort of generative AI, where we're creating assistants or creating really smart people to replace people. But now you're talking about, well, I can use this AI on this application that I have in my manufacturing facility or in my banking, small banking firm or grocery store, retail, or whatever. I mean, the amount of, if I think about, I worked in retail for a long time, and when we as an industry got to the point where we could scan things in real time and understand that it was time to restock, that was a huge win for everybody. And now you can put AI behind that, and maybe it's a cloud connector to the data center, or maybe it is a little box somewhere, but they're them owning their own language models and doing all that's pretty interesting idea to me. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But then more security implications.
A lot more security implications. And the reason why I bring up the healthcare, I know of two companies that were founded in like the last 6-7 months that are literally creating a healthcare app for physicians and nursing professionals. There's already one, and it's not of a huge concern right now, that exists for veterinary clinics. My vet that I went to was describing this to me. And his team no longer has to write up reports. They just take their note taker on their phone, and it automatically sends it to their AI, and it builds all the clinical information on that pet back to the system of record. And, I just envision like knowing that there's two healthcare companies that were founded in Boston in the last 6 months are essentially doing it for the same thing for stuff that really needs to be secured, because there is going to be PII. information in there. There's going to need to be redaction. There's going to need to be encryption. So anything that you can think of that you're doing today, you really have to think about, what is that model going to do to it? What is that system that model sits on? What is that going to do to it? And you're going to have to run through your same hierarchy of securing that platform as you would anything else.
Right. Yeah, it's funny you said health, because I don't know that we think of healthcare being leading edge for security, but I remember, well, maybe for maybe that's the reason it's leading edge for technology, not always security. Because I remember talking to a healthcare CISO a few years ago, and they had, she was telling me they had the little robots that like run around there and help out. And, they had an IoT security thing, but now you got to think the robot's going to get AI at least, the very least, some ML, right?
Right. 100%. Yeah. Yeah. There's a couple companies out of their ex Microsofters that are essentially building a new operating system specifically for robots. And a lot of that operating system has not necessarily generative AI. There is some generative AI models in there for the language and the interpretation, but they're using like a neural network and some deep learning also in there. But this OS is going to be a new kind of almost like the Microsoft DOS for robots. So any robot, no matter what you're developing, their goal is to have this foundational OS that'll be standardized across robots. And there's going to be a lot of
Is that like an OS for AI or just an OS for robots?
OS for robots, but it's all AI driven. So I'm assuming that there's going to be very, very small XPUs on that robot that are going to run the brain of the robot. And just think about the security implications there.
Well, yeah,
I mean,
like it's the same thing. Again, it's a lot of the same thing we saw in manufacturing. Again, Rockwell, Siemens, all these, on the shop floor devices have their own operating systems, PLCs, all this. So we've got a Purdue model for it. Do we need an AI model to apply to all this for robot AI?
Yeah. I think you're onto something there. I think there is going to have to be a new foundational model, new foundational security model around AI systems. I mean, a number of people have been talking about this, and everybody's got their point of view to sell their ware, right? But
Sure.
I'm like thinking about the thing holistically from top to bottom, from like I consider layer 0 at the chip level or below the chip level, like somebody trying to impact the memory of the chip or within memory of the chip. That's, a lot of this processing power happens all the way to layer 7. So, and maybe there's some net new layers that go beyond that in terms of the physicality of a robot that you also have to think about. So yeah, I think you're onto something. Well, I think it's gonna, you might have just coined something net new.
That'll be cool. I'm sure I'll get paid lots of money for that idea.
Open source, baby. Open source.
Well, and again, I think about, like you said, because the edge compute's a big deal, right? And so perimeter controls are different for that situation. How we protect all that. I like, and I love what you said too about the, like building your own little AI in-house. It's similar to what it actually ties in well too. Like I'm sure in the 1950s there was some propaganda advertising about how everybody's going to have a nuclear reactor in their backyard, and now it's actually coming to fruition. And so you've got all of this new technology driving new security needs. So super interesting, Joe. I could talk to you forever about this. But if somebody else wants to talk to you or wants to get a hold of you, where can everybody find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, the best place is honestly to find me on LinkedIn under Joseph Cardin. Up there, like I got a number of companies that I'm doing advisory work for, all in cyber, some AI, some not AI. But that's probably the best way to find me, is that way.
Awesome.
And I'm pretty open about sharing my information. If people contact me, I pretty much respond in 24 hours to anybody and everybody, unless it's some sort of dubious solicitation of something.
Yeah.
Um,
You don't want to buy any franchises, is what you're
yeah.
saying.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate that, Joe. It's been awesome talking to you, man. Talk to you again
Great.
soon.
Well, you got it. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for enjoying Keyboard Samurai Podcast. If you'd like to engage, find Will on LinkedIn at /WillClue or visit at willclue.me. That's WILKLU.me for more info. Disconnecting now. Synac you later.